In the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Peace and blessings and mercy of God be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Hello and welcome, dear viewers, to this week's Open Dialogue. Tonight, inshallah, we will be discussing an important topic, and that is relationships. Relationships are very important for our development and our survival. But sometimes relationships can become toxic and can become difficult to live with. Tonight we are going to discuss and we will see what healthy relationships should look like. And when we are confronted with difficult relationships and toxic relationships, how can we deal with those? And what practical steps can we take to help ourselves when we are confronted with difficult people? Because sometimes we can't leave those relationships. To discuss this topic, we are joined by two esteemed guests. We are joined by Sister Shazia Haji. Sister Shazia Haji has an MA in Islamic Studies. She's a motivational speaker in Quranic sciences and the traditions of the Holy Prophet. She is a relationship advisor, a certified NLP practitioner, and coach. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Shazia.
Walaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Very honored for you to join us, and thank you so much. I'm looking forward to having the discussion tonight and benefit from your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me, inshallah.
We will also be joined by Hujjatul Islam and Muslimin Sayyid Mohammad Razavi, who is the religious head of the advisory board at the Shia Islamic Education Society in London, where he deals with clients and he deals with family disputes on a daily basis, and he tries to resolve those issues according to the Islamic laws. We're going to, Sister Shazia, you are currently doing some ladies courses online, I understand, in Quranic tafsir, but you are focusing in those classes on certain aspects. Can you explain that to the viewers and what is it that exactly you do?
Yes, so my interest when I completed my postgraduate in Islamic studies was always self-development and self-growth. And so I'd always like to look into tafasirs, which would help in regards of that, as well as spiritual self-growth. And as a woman, firstly as a wife, and then a mother and a daughter. So I felt like I was always gravitating towards finding solutions in relationships
Yes.
through upholding eternal principles through the Quran. So I always find myself trying to find a way to live life, live through relationships with upholding Quranic values. And Alhamdulillah, I got an opportunity by trying to do that first for myself, and then found some training in that, and then now sharing what I know that I've applied in my life with others.
It's very interesting. So you give lessons in how to take Quranic lessons and develop oneself and one's spirituality through that.
That's
If I
correct, through
understand.
relationships. Yes, inshallah,
Right.
yes.
You're also doing something else. You are doing a course in Find Tranquility in Chaos. What's that about?
So during COVID, there was a group of ladies who wanted to better their relationships in a way where they can come closer in close proximity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we devised this program called Finding Tranquility in the Chaos. Often in relationships, you find yourself having difference of opinion and difference of unresolvable issues come up. And so this program was devised where one could learn eternal principles from the Quran and apply it in their life in a very practical level with communication skills. And so it organically became into a course in a way. And yes, so I do teach a part of a mentoring course, and then I offer one-on-one personal coaching with that.
So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that if they want to join in with your course, if any of the viewers are interested?
So I'll share my WhatsApp number and then they can get in touch with me. As of right now, I am not, have not announced the course, inshallah.
Courses?
Maybe my plan is to announce a course for 2023 soon. But otherwise, they can
Sure.
just get in touch with me and I do one-on-one mentoring and coaching.
Perfect. So, dear viewers, if you're interested in joining any of Mr. Shazia's courses, or are interested in more information about the program she has already done and that are available on YouTube and social media, please contact us on the opendialogue@hotmail.com, our email address, and we will inshallah get you in touch with the sister. Let's start tonight's discussion, Sister Shazia. Toxic relationships. First of all, to understand what a toxic relationship, I think we need to understand what a healthy relationship is, and what should healthy relationships look like for us to identify when we digress from that.
Yes. So healthy relationship is something which is, the word itself is self-explanatory, like something which is nurturing, something which is healthy is someone which is revived, someone is nurtured, someone is healthy. So a relationship
Mhm,
which can be cultivated is cultivated and nurturing and living, and the
mhm.
opposite would be something which would be unhealthy, is something which is lacking and is dying and needs, so as to say, life within it. So healthy would be in a relationship is somewhere where two partners, whether it be in marriage or in.
Okay, the Syed is experiencing voice issues. The technical team is going to look into that. Yes, carry on, Sister Shazia.
So somewhere, someone where who feels listened, heard. So I would say it in acronyms. I love acronyms and mnemonics. So LSC, someone who feels, who's heard, listens. Is when both parties feel that they're heard. There's listening in there. There's a mutual listening. There's mutual support, where one feels support and is not constantly feeling like they have to walk around eggshells. And we'll define what is unhealthy relationships. And then someone who feels cared, who can share vulnerably and respects. And so a healthy relationship is based on reciprocal, like in the Quran it says mawadda and rahma. So there's this reciprocal, there's this respect, reciprocal respect, where I don't essentially have to be exactly how I am. We can be two different people having
Mhm.
different mindsets and ideologies, or at least not ideology but mindsets and way of doing life, but have a mutual respect and understanding and feel heard. So, listening, feel support, and feel cared, essentially.
Very nicely explained. Before I move on to the Sayyid, I just want you to explain one thing that you just mentioned is sharing vulnerability. What is this? If you can just elaborate a little bit more on that.
So when one says vulnerably, is that there might be times where you know that you can't do what you're asked to do, for instance, and
Hmm.
you're not scared to say, if I'm unable to say what I can, if I say I'll be judged, but I can be my true self, and I don't feel like I'm going to be judged, or I'm going to be have an opinion made and then be criticized or corrected. So being vulnerable means it's okay to feel my emotions and being able to express them. So if I'm feeling sad, or I feel like I don't feel like doing this right now for you, or I can't, to be able to say I can't is being vulnerable. To be able to say I miss you is vulnerable. To be able to say I don't feel loved, without feeling like what is the other person going to think, how am I weak, or being vulnerable comes from being trying to be able to be your authentic true self with another person and not feeling judged. Of course, it's not a 50-50 black and white. Of course, there's respect in that too, depending on the relationship. But in the Quran, for marriage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, libasu libas hunna. So that one thing which covers and protects us. And I use that ayah to explain vulnerability in the course.
Thank you so much for that thorough explanation. And Syed, what is the importance of relationships in Islam?
Bismillah ar-Rahman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I can hardly hear anyone. So anyway, seems to be problems, technology problems. And
We can,
can you hear me?
yes, Syed, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, family is the smallest unit of the society, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala wants us to give importance to the smallest unit of the society. And unfortunately, recent, or I would say that during last 100 years of development in the world, they tried to move everything uh, uh, into society, and people had idea that we will build a society where people will trust and depend on each other, and for them the importance would be development of society by ignoring the smallest unit and smallest unit of the society. From Islamic point of view, it is extremely important to uh, establish the foundation of the society properly, which is the family. And family is created by male and female uh, joining together in marriage. And when they join together, they establish the society, and they establish the family, and that family with grows with ethical and moral values, and with mutual respect and companionship and giving comfort to each other. So if the smallest unit is based on taking care of each other, it will take care of the other families. First of all, nearest family like sisters, brothers, siblings, uncles, aunties, and then friends and neighbors, and it will become a proper society. But unfortunately, the way society has been developed, it has gone totally in other direction. And the West, who has experienced all of this, are realizing that and gradually going back to the previous ways of living. There is increasingly uh, attraction towards establishing homeschooling and larger family units, and aunts and uncles and others taking care of each other rather than depending on outsiders. So I think if we Muslims, instead of copying and repeating the mistake that West has already uh, experienced, that we should stick to the Islamic principles and go back to those values that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very clearly mentions in Quran, that He created us in pairs, and He refers this creation of us in pairs not only to human beings but to every creation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made. And that is the natural way of living. And then we should concentrate to develop that way of the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established this whole world in pairs. And while developing that, the parents should learn how to respect each other. In some Muslim countries, they have already started a course before marriage, and in those courses and classes, family values are taught to the couple. If they pass the test, then they are allowed to get married and establish a family. I think we should all move in that direction, and especially the centers and Hussainiyas and mosques can play a very important role. And nowadays, social media and TV channels also can play an important role in developing the society and moving the society in right direction.
Definitely. It's quite interesting you mentioned this, because the first relationship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created is the relationship of a spouse. And it's the relationship of a husband and a wife. And that was the first ever relation that's been created on earth. And definitely, I agree with you is that we should have more educational programs to train young minds who are entering into the relationships of marriage in the difficulties they will experience, their roles and responsibilities. And I think the more we do in this front is required. But Sister Shazia, moving the discussion along, we want to also know, what do toxic relationships look like? Because nowadays we have these terms flying about everywhere: narcissism, toxicity. Uh, so what do we mean when we say a toxic relationship?
So the word itself is very self-explanatory. You have to excuse me, I'm a little low in energy here. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. So being toxic means, where, imagine a plant. A healthy plant is something which is growing, its vitality is strong, and it's getting the sun and it's yielding fruit. And the opposite would be when it's poisoned and then it starts dying on itself. It's not that the external environment is not giving it to grow. So a
Mhm,
toxic relationship per se is, a relationship is made out of two people, right? And so that relationship becomes toxic, not because it's either the person themselves or the actions make that relationship go bad. And that's why
mhm,
I don't like when we are, just like how you said, labeling people themselves, saying, oh, this person is toxic. So what we're saying
mhm,
is that it's absolute. The person is toxic. And that essentially goes against our, Syed would be able to explain this better, goes against our intrinsic nature as human beings. No human being on the face of this earth intrinsically, existentially is toxic. But the
right.
actions that one does is toxic, the action itself, and then that action brought in a relationship makes that relationship toxic. So when that
Right.
mindset of, when we separate that the person from the action, we are able to then, inshallah, we'll discuss this further, that what is the toxic actions, because people can change, right? And can
Mhm,
be, the actions can make them represent like something, and then they can change. So people can display toxic actions, and I love to just stress on this, and I get a lot of hate sometimes by people. Why can't you just be simple, straightforward, and say toxic people? But I don't allow myself to label someone, because then it's very difficult to then, what we will discuss later is then boxing people, and
So
then
I
so
would like you to
toxic.
elaborate. I would like you to
Thank you.
elaborate. What are the traits that make a relationship toxic? The exact traits that we should be looking for that are
Yeah,
not
so a
healthy.
character, exact. So the characteristics of a relationship which become toxic is one where two parties don't feel heard, they don't feel accepted, they feel there's resentment, and it's not a simple, one of resentment or I don't feel heard. It's for a long period of time where I'm walking around eggshells around this person,
Mhm,
and I'm
mhm,
constantly having to compromise. I don't feel
right.
heard. I don't feel seen. I have to compromise. It's like a one sided relationship where I have to avoid talking about issues because I'm constantly worried how will this be taken? I'm going to be corrected, criticized, or complained. So you just bottom line is I can't be myself. And so
Yes,
that relationship looks like a toxic relationship because it's not a relationship which is healthy and growing and enabling two parties in that relationship to reach their full potential.
right. Okay. So then how do we, so when we have these kind of relationships, and in Islam, we have very important relationships such as our parents, we have relationships that really can't be broken as per Islamic law. We have the concept of Sila Rahim, which is, keeping ties with the blood relations, and these are not breakable ties. Um, and sometimes, even if it's a relationship that's not a blood relationship, such as spousal relationship, that cannot be broken at times because of the presence of children or any other issues. Then, in that instance, what should we do when we are not being heard in a relationship, when we are not being acknowledged, we are facing a stone wall, and it's a relationship that we cannot break? What do we do? By the way, dear viewers, I'd like to also point out here that Sister Shazia has kindly agreed to be with us at early morning hours from where she is, and to share her knowledge with us. So thank you so much again, Sister Shazia. And yes, if you could
Yes.
explain to us when we are in a difficult situation in a relationship that cannot be broken, what can we do?
Yes. So exactly what you just said. I felt acknowledged. I felt accepted, and I felt heard right now. Just by acknowledging me, accepting me, and I felt heard that hey, she's understanding. And so, before we go into labeling and saying, oh, what she just said about toxic, I'm in that relationship. We have to first of all be honest that it's not like a black and white, but in a long time period where I just feel a lot of resentment because I am not feeling accepted and validated or heard. I am not myself for a longer
Mhm.
period. That's what then is what's a way out. So if we go separate, we have to break these out because there are different protocols for different relationships. When it comes to parents,
I'll just
according to Islam, D.
Sure. I'll just pose you there for one moment. We have the Syed back, so let me pose a question to him, and then I'll come back to you, inshallah. Syed, in Islam, there are relationships that cannot be broken. And so, even if we are in a difficult relationship where we are not being heard, where we're not being respected, where we are facing a stone wall, we are having difficulty in communicating with those people. What can we do? Because there are some relationships that are not breakable. If you could explain those relationships first, and what be about those relationships that makes them unbreakable relationships.
Well, blood relationship is permanent and eternal, and breaking the blood relationship is highly disliked in Islam. Although there are situations where people could do that, but
Mm,
the narrations for doing that are so harsh, and the rules and regulations for that are so difficult that if people knew the consequences of that, especially on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa
mm,
ta'ala would not leave the person who uh, broke the relationship with his or her blood relations for no reason. And he would question, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I am the one who helped you to establish this relationship, and this relationship, which is establishing a family, is a very sacred relationship. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives importance to that, and that's why it is highly not recommended to cut your ties and relationship with blood relatives. Yes, so there are situations where you reach to the point that there is no other way, and if it is justified, then of course it is okay. Uh, but the advice is that even if that has happened, we should always try to aim to re-establish and reconnect that kind of broken relationship. And also, it is a duty and responsibility of friends and relatives who come to know of people who have discontinued their connection with the blood relations, to help them to go back to each other. And
But then
of course,
accepting a difficult relationship, as you say, that is a abusive relationship, does that just not mean that we're accepting humiliation?
yes, of course. I mean, you have to judge and you have to look at the reasons. If there is abuse going on and you are letting the abuse carry on against yourself, so that is oppressing yourself. Islam does not allow one to oppress himself or herself. So if you are in a situation where, I mean, like father is abusing child, or child is abusing father, or siblings are abusing each other, and they are selfish and they are not taking care of their rights and responsibilities and duties towards each other, and instead of taking care of each other, they are actually hurting and harming each other. So in that case, the best thing is to just disconnect for a while. Don't go to the level of doing aq. Aq is seriously not considered as a permissible action. It can be
What is our,
used.
for
Aq
the
means
viewers? What is our?
you disown your parents, you disown your siblings, you disown your child. So disowning, I think even in a civil law, disowning is considered very serious. I remember a few years ago, there was a case in America that a child wanted to disown a non not grown up child wanted to disown his parents, and the reason he wanted to disown his parents was because he was suffering from the abuse that was taking place. So he officially, it was in the news as well that he wanted to disown. So disowning is not unfamiliar even in the Western or civil society. In religions also, disowning uh, is discussed in Islam, in Christianity, in Judaism, and any divine religion. Disowning is highly unrecommended and has been discussed. And
Right.
disowning could lead up to refusing someone to inherit from you. Uh, Although judges have to be brought in these situations, and they have to finally judge the situation.
So, Sister Shazia, in order to prevent situations from going that far, we were talking about acceptance in the last question. What can children then do when they are confronted with toxic parents that they cannot break up with? And how can that relationship then continue?
Parents whose actions are toxic. um, so, yes, parents whose actions are toxic. So, what's important is either we change the situation, or we can leave a situation, or we accept a situation. And the Quran says that you can't change anybody other than yourselves. Allah says, I will not change a situation. Allah will not change situation. Allah yughayyiru ma biqawm. Allah will not change a situation of a nation until every individual takes responsibility of themselves. And that's one of the most important eternal principle ayats that are part of the course as well. And so accepting a situation looks like accepting that I can't change another person, having realistic expectations. I cannot change anybody other than myself, having realistic expectations from, i.e., parents or other relationship that we can talk later about. And then understanding accepting looks like I can only change myself. And so owning that decision, if you are, from a spiritual perspective, owning this decision that for my salvation, I choose to respect my parents even though their actions are disrespectful, like how Syed is saying, the actions are maybe disrespectful, right? So acceptance look like that. No one is saying we have to separate these two, especially as counselors, coaches, religious scholars, that no one is saying to accept the oppressive act, and that's where we get lost in translation and we get hated on, that, oh, you're telling us accept. That means accepting the act. No one's saying that. Two wrongs does not make a right. Often I have to explain this. That when I have to invite the women towards accepting a situation, we're not saying accepting that verbal abuse or, I do relationships for basically for marriage. So I'm not saying that accepting emotional abuse or physical abuse, saying this is wrong, accepting my position. Now what I'm going to do is I accept this is wrong, and I accept that I can't change other than myself. And with that accepting, I own my decision that I still choose to do relationship. I still choose to be in this relationship, and that is intent. And that intention is that first key ingredient for any relationship or any acceptance to take place, is to accept, separate the action from the person and say, okay, this action is wrong, and I choose to still do relationship. And then there's of course many skills that one can discuss if it's parent children. What are essentially, okay, then how do I work forward with my father or my mother? How?
Okay, so Sayed, for following what the sister just mentioned, of course, working through relationships is also a mean for self-development. So it's not a lost cause when you decide that you will bear with the relationship and separate the individual from their action, as Sister Shazia just said. Yes, it exerts some effort on one's part, but it also is a means for development and getting closer to Allah. Do you agree?
Yes, actually, I use that verse that Sister quoted quite a lot in giving advice to my clients. When I discuss with them, I usually say that, look, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot change people unless they decide to change themselves, who are we to expect our partners, our children, our siblings, our parents to change? So the best thing is to express what you want and understand what others want. Then you should judge the limits within Islamic limits, of course, and then agree to continue in a way that it doesn't become abusive towards each other. So that is the best solution. I mean, expecting to completely change someone else is wrong. I mean, even two brothers or two sisters who have grown up in one family, grown up by one parent, could have completely different ideas, and they cannot be expected to have exactly same life as others. I mean, usually in matchmaking in olden days, although in practices of holy imams we don't find this, Majority of the marriages of our holy imams were in different tribes, and very few marriages have taken place between cousins. And even they went to non-Sayyids and married non-Sayyids, and expanded the family. And uh, so the practice of a holy imams shows that they did not believe in that. But unfortunately, in our society, we see that people think because this, I mean, the other partner is a cousin, they would be suitable couple for each other. And I have seen examples of cousin marriages ending up in disaster, and they don't understand each other. So we have to be very careful. We should not impose a cousin marriage, or because just because they have lived near to us, it doesn't mean that they are exactly on the same track as we are. So in any case, when a couple, when people get married, in first few years they have to uh, learn how to understand each other, and by understanding each other, they can maybe decide a better future for themselves and the children.
So, following from the point that you just made, Syed, Sister Shazia, it of course, well, Syed has just touched on the spouse relationship, which is what you predominantly deal with in your coaching and relationship advice. But you can't force people also to attend therapy with you or to understand the relationship and to give and take. What should one do in that instance?
If suppose, let me see if I got your answer question right. Are you is you are you asking that we can't, if we know that the other person needs help and needs some sort of support, um, even though one would change themselves, but you still feel like the other person also needs that help, and you can't control them to get that help. So what do you do in that case? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. And also, how
So
do you
you
change yourself when you're in that situation also? Because changing oneself and how to look at a situation is, again, it's an art in itself and it's very tricky. If you can shed more light on that too.
So when it comes to parent child relationship, it's different from husband and wife relationship. The parents relationship, even if the parent is being is oppressive physically or emotionally, you still do relationship with them. But again, like how Sayed said, there are boundaries, and you would still have respectful conversations whilst they are choosing to act in that certain way. And then you have boundaries depending on how old you are, and then you come out from a place of intent that this is good for my salvation, and Allah will change a situation where I can invite my parents to a respectful conversation where I can invite them for a third person party to be involved in a way where we could have a dialogue. Parents. Now, when it comes to a husband and wife situation, the skills essentially are so beautiful that when a wife learns what is, or essentially a woman, I'm talking from a women's perspective, that when a woman understands her power of influence and a relationship, and she finds her true identity with God, and is not coming from a place of need but a place of full and not lack, she change is contagious. And that's what essentially in this verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inviting us towards, that when you start doing your inner work yourself, it's contagious. There's law of attraction. You start, the inner work looks like you choose respect, and don't it's a very common saying that I will only respect when if I the other person deserves respect. I will only be respectful if the other person is respectful. That's a very, very unhealthy mindset. It's like
Hmm.
choosing and saying, you know what, I choose to be a good person if you're a good person. So if you're not a good person, I'm going to let my salvation go. So step number one for that person is to know who they are, to find their identity in themselves with God, essentially as believers, knowing that, and then working on an intent that I still choose to do relationship, and owning that intent for themselves. Finding that, support spiritually from, like, Syed or people like me, having a process where they go and work in their own inner child wounds if they have, or trauma that they might have gone through, where it gets
Yes,
projected. So there's one very important three words in a sentence which are very, very important. Are you ready for it, Sister Zainab?
yes, I am.
Perception is projection. That's the most important key. Whatever my perception is, I will project that. Even if I believe that I'm going to make this work, but if my perception is I didn't ever see, I was not modeled a good relationship, if my perception is not going to work, I will project that. I will project that to my relationship. And so the inner work is the most important part of the work towards inviting another person to also, what you are essentially asking me, how do I invite the other person to do their inner work, to
Yes,
do their taskiya, to do their refinement? Well, so it starts from you. What is your perception about inner work? You project that too. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said it many times in the Quran, about the concept of law of attraction. And hasanati yuzibna sayyat. He is the one who removes the sayyah if there's hasana. So many ayat, so many eternal times, principles God has said. So He is the key prince. He is the changer. Yubaddil as-sayyat. He is the one who muqallib al-qulub changes. But as you start your journey of the inner work with an intent, with support, and of course, automatically you will project that. But if there's that inner perception, which is I don't know, doubt, maybe, maybe not, still having unrealistic expectations, I'm changing, you change too. That's very, very unhealthy mindset. That means you're not doing it for yourself, for your salvation. You're just, I choose to be respected for you. So the goal is not essentially God, as believers at least. The goal is still the person, the, the
so what
man,
happens then
or,
if you are on the path of change and you are changing for God's sake, and but the other person is not changing,
that's
and so your
fine.
problem remains
So
where it is?
So many a times. And so Allah Himself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unfortunately, Quran has become like a magic wand. Read this surah, this will happen. I get a lot of clients, not clients, sisters, tell me, oh, I've done this amal and I've done this and I've done that. Why aren't things changing? We're human beings. We're not robots. And so as we give ourselves time, we are also giving, it's a new dance that you're doing. And there are communication skills that you learn. You learn to invite the person rather than have a very expectation, having a correcting, complaining, and criticizing communicative uh, communication. Hey, I'm doing this for you. What are you doing? It's not going to work. So it's more about your 7% of communication by words is only 7% by research. It's your attitude and your body language which is much more. So I get it many times. Hey, whatever you're telling me, I'm doing. It's not working. And so, I tell them it's guaranteed that it will work. Let's go through it. What's happening? See, it's very difficult when you are redoing something and going back and learning and then going. It takes time. However, God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Himself says, I don't lie. And so it's a promise, and it's a divine promise by Him when He calls us out. And so it works. However, commitment, and he said, wastaqamu. He says, and maybe Syed can help me with this ayah of the Quran, qalu rabbuna Allah, and then they are steadfast on that, And then there's a whole course where you learn the communication skills when you're inviting someone for the real person which is stuck inside that person, that oppressive person. And you look at the good. Allah Himself says, "Innal hasanat." So you're inviting the good. Hey, you know, the other day when you smiled at me, it made me feel so special. There's a human being in everyone. That has changed.
It's very interesting how you just brought Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the creator, the God, into the whole equation of our feelings and our relationships, and you made it
It
the
is on
central
Him.
point.
It is
But
on Him. Yep.
Sayed,
It is on.
does accepting a situation and accepting a relationship that is hurting you and trying to work, as the sister said, and working with professionals to unpick habits and unpick issues and put practical steps for change, does patience pay off in the end?
Well, everybody has a limit and boundaries. We should respect each other's boundaries and limits. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us. And when He says, "Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim," He's clearly saying that even Allah does not like to impose and change the boundaries that you have set for yourself. So if you want a change to be brought by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your life, you have to make a step forward towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then you will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taking 10 steps towards you. So you have to make this initial effort. If you don't make the initial effort, then you don't receive the blessings. So, as sister was also mentioning that there is a hadith actually from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he used to say the best way of conveying message is body language, not tongue. By tongue, you can maybe give orders when it is necessary to give orders, or rules and regulations can show the boundaries and limits. But if you are aiming and trying to uh, show your acceptance of someone else, it should be shown by body language. And even Islam can grow with body language. Those who think that Islam can be propagated by lectures and arguments and discussions, they are wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like that, and Prophet Muhammad clearly used to say that كونوا دعاة للناس بغير ألسنتكم. If you want people to be attracted to you, you should invite them not with your tongue, with your body language. So our behavior should be the source of attraction. Usually, in couples cases, um, I sorry to explain this in this way that uh, I explain to couple that if you want to attract your spouse and wife, husband, you have to start from early in the morning. Then by evening, she or he will be happy the way you have behaved with her or him throughout the day. Then that will make her or him to give the peace that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Quran, that Allah created couple to give peace and satisfaction to each other. So in order to achieve that peace, you have to start from early morning, then you can have that peace at night.
There are, of course, so many things to unpick in this topic, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the conversation. I wish it wouldn't end, and I wish it wasn't early morning hours at your end, Sister Shazia. But unfortunately, the time of the program has come to an end, and I saw you there shaking your head at what the Sayyid was saying. So please elaborate and also give your concluding remarks once you have, if there is anything else that you would like to add to what the Sayyid was saying.
You know how you asked about patience pay off in the end. Um, if, like how Syed is explaining that if you're trying with to improve your communication skills, working on yourself, and knowing that the other person needs help, could be, going visiting a clinical psychologist because you can see those traits that this person does need that sort of help. Could be any sort of help. But what really, really gives me solace is, again, coming back to the Holy Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if any human being, if they're going to go through the challenges in life, and if they deal with challenges, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala names those challenges, when you go through the challenges of life, of health, wealth, loss in wealth and children, but when they say, قَالُوا inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, their slogan in life, or like an attitude in life, is that nothing is mine, nothing belongs to me, and this marriage, this relationship, this partner that Allah has paired me with, that I have been paired with, is a gift by Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. So sabr, when you said patience, it paid off, is patience is a proactive. It's been, I feel bad for patience, because patience has been told as, some, it's like not proactive. Patience is actually a gift, scholars say, which is given by God. But what we are asked to do is to do life with tawheed, to do life from monotheism, like inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. The degree it becomes, more of a attitude in life, Allah grants us that patience. And patience looks like where He says, "Humul ulaika humul muhtad," they are the ones who are guided. So guidance will look like this expansion of the heart. So it's a win-win. Whether that marriage ends or it becomes a healthy relationship and grows, but it's a win-win for you. Why? Because you're growing spiritually, by growing, and then Allah will give you that expansion of that heart. To then, we all want wisdom, we all want to know what to do, when to do, how to do, where to do. That's hikmah. When to do, what to do, how to do, when to speak. And so that comes by Allah. In Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, whoever has hikmah, if Syed can remind me of this ayat, it's khair. It's the biggest gift that God can give us, that expansion of the soul. When what to do, we're all looking for that. I want to say the right word at the right time, at the right place, to the right person. That's wisdom. And God promises you, He will give you as much as you can live on Tawheed. So the course is all about, as a woman, how can I uphold godly values in a relationship which might not have the L and the S and the C, the listening, the support, and the care and the balance. And so I want to end here by saying that research says 70% of issues that come in relationships are unresolvable. So please don't set up yourself up for any disappointment that you and I should be on same paper. There is no same paper. My 5 fingers I see every day, and they are unlike. So we are all different. But the ability to respect, the ability to see you. And so I want to end here by using this: intimacy is into you, into me, I see you. As in, I see you from not who you are, but see you as God's creature. And you could be a means for my growth. So I respect you for who you are, and I choose to focus on the person, the good qualities. And Allah has promised that whatever you focus on, He promises He'll increase it. وَلَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, I will increase that. وَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, it's His promise. So, sorry, I keep on saying I want to conclude, and that's my conclusion. Whatever your intent, whatever you focus will increase. And so, not to set up yourself for disappointment that, well, my husband should be exactly the way I want him to be. And, there will be unresolvable issues all the time. But it's a win-win. And Allah has promised that, as long as you are striving to uphold godly values in as much as in your strength that you can.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Shazia. What I understood from that is that one's attitude is the way to growth. Growth
Absolutely.
personally, growth in a relationship, and growth spiritually as well. So attitude is what matters. Thank you. And Sayed, what are your concluding remarks? Unfortunately, we're out of time in this program.
Yeah, I mean, very simply, I mean, the verses of Holy Quran very clearly say our aim in our life should be purification, education, then wisdom. If we purify ourselves in personal level or family level, then educate ourselves, then we will achieve the wisdom that is required. So we should
Thank
aim
you
for
very
that.
much. I'm so grateful to both of you. I know both of you, it's late for both of you, and you've had a very, very busy day. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us, for being with us. And I look forward to hosting you again, Sister Shazia, and gaining more from your experience and from your knowledge, inshallah. Thank you so much, dear viewers, for listening. I will see you, inshallah, next